My husband sold our house while I was in surgery. I returned to find strangers living in my bedroom. The first thing I noticed when I stepped out of the cab, clutching my hospital discharge papers, was the silence. Home was supposed to feel warm, familiar, safe, but as I walked toward the front door, dragging my tired body after hours of surgery and recovery, something felt off. The curtains in the living room were different. The flower pot I had placed on the porch last spring was gone. And when I put the key into the lock, it didn't turn. Confused, I knocked. A few seconds later, a woman I had never seen before opened the door. She wore a smile of polite annoyance, as though I was interrupting her evening. "Can I help you?" she asked. My house," I stammered, staring inside. The furniture was wrong. The walls were painted a color I had never chosen. "This is my home." The woman frowned, then called out, "Tom, there's someone here." Moments later, a man appeared, holding a box in his arms. He looked at me like I was some lost stranger. "This house was sold last week," he said flatly. "We bought it. We live here now." The words cut deeper than the incision still healing across my stomach. My knees nearly buckled. My house, my safe place, my sanctuary, the home where I had built dreams with my husband, gone. Sold. While I was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for my health. I barely remember how I made it back to the cab. My phone trembled in my hands as I dialed my husband's number, my heart hammering against my ribs. He answered on the third ring, his tone cold and detached. "Why can't I get into our house?" I demanded, my voice breaking. A pause. Then, with no trace of shame, he said, "Because it's not our house anymore. I sold it. We needed the money." The money. That was his explanation. I had sacrificed, saved, worked 2 jobs at one point just to help us keep that house afloat. It wasn't just bricks and wood, it was memories, love, everything I thought we were building together. "How could you?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "You wouldn't understand," he snapped. "You're always too emotional." I did what had to be done. And then he hung up. That night, I slept on a hospital waiting room chair, because I had nowhere else to go. I wrapped myself in the thin blanket the nurse had offered me, feeling not just betrayed but discarded, like I was nothing more than an inconvenience to the man I had vowed to love. Days passed in a blur of anger and disbelief. Friends offered couches, but I couldn't shake the image of strangers unpacking in what used to be my bedroom, laying claim to a space that had once been filled with my laughter, my tears, my life. I needed answers. I learned, through documents and bank statements I forced from him, that he had sold the house without even consulting me. While I was in surgery, he signed papers, pocketed the money, and moved on. And worse, he hadn't spent the money on bills or emergencies. He had spent it on his gambling debts, debts I hadn't even known existed. The man I thought I knew, the partner I believed had my back, had sold away not just my home, but my trust, my stability, my future. For weeks, I fought despair. But something inside me, something stronger than the betrayal, refused to let him destroy me completely. I realized I had 2 choices. I could stay broken, or I could rebuild. So, I chose to rebuild. I filed for divorce. The moment I signed the papers, I felt lighter, as though I had finally dropped the weight of his deceit from my shoulders. It wasn't easy, lawyers, hearings, endless questions, but each step reminded me that I was claiming back my life. With the little savings I had, I rented a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in months, I could shut the door and know that the space behind it was safe. No lies, no secrets, just me. I also reached out to old friends, people I had drifted from during my marriage because I had been too busy trying to keep everything together. To my surprise, they welcomed me back with open arms. Slowly, I rebuilt not just my home, but my sense of family, of belonging. And through it all, I began to rediscover myself. I went back to hobbies I had abandoned, painting, writing, even gardening in small pots on my balcony. These little joys became symbols of the life I was creating on my own terms. Months later, I drove past my old house. The new owners had decorated the front porch with fresh flowers. For a moment, my chest tightened with grief. But then I realized, it wasn't my home anymore, and that was okay. My home wasn't 4 walls and a roof. My home was wherever I stood strong, wherever I found peace, wherever I refused to let betrayal define me. My story isn't just about loss, it's about survival. About realizing that sometimes the people you trust most can hurt you in ways you never imagined, but their actions don't have to end your story. Yes, my husband sold our house while I was in surgery. But in doing so, he unknowingly gave me something else: freedom. Freedom to build a life not chained to lies. Freedom to stand tall, even when everything crumbled around me. Freedom to discover that I was far stronger than I ever knew. So if you're listening to this, and you've been betrayed, abandoned, or left with nothing, remember this: your home, your worth, your future, cannot be sold by anyone. You carry them inside you. And no matter how hard it gets, you can always rebuild. Because sometimes, losing everything is the first step toward finding yourself.